Australians call this the bush, although over most of its surface the trees are sparse and the bushes are few. In the heart of the bush, in the midwest of New South Wales, 350 miles from Sydney, the town of Weethally, which has a population of 300, is preparing to celebrate the 200th anniversary of Australia becoming British. The principal dignitary in Weethally is the Catholic parish priest, Father Vivian Morrison, Doctor of Canon Law.
Right on, mate. Let's go and see the boys coming in. Our beloved Queen, please accept the humble prayers and devoted wishes for her gracious self and esteemed family from the loyal subjects of Weethally and districts. I would now like to ask Mr. Rutledge to sign this on behalf of us all. Councillor Rutledge.
From the capital cities of the 6 states of Australia, once the 6 colonies, members of the British Empire Boys Brigade run for 2 weeks across the continent carrying messages of loyalty to Botany Bay, where the British Empire in Australia began. Queen Elizabeth II arrives by sea on a royal tour about the same time as the message from Weethally arrives from the bush.
Right, turn.
A party of Aborigines on the beach and a party of actors in a ship's boat reenact Captain Cook's discovery of the eastern coast of Australia in April 1770. There were then 250,000 Aborigines in Australia. They had occupied the continent for some 40,000 years. The coming of the British meant the end of their Stone Age culture, a reduction of their numbers to 1/4 within the next 100 years. The first British act in Australia was to offer the inhabitants a necklace of brightly coloured beads.
to witness. I take possession of the whole eastern coast of this country by the name of New South Wales, together with all the bays, harbours, rivers and islands situated upon the said coast, in the name of His Majesty King George III and his heirs and successors forever.
In February 1788, Australia became part of the British Empire as a colony for convicts. By a stroke of his pen, King George III transformed the remote and empty bush into a prison. During the next 50 years, 167,000 Britons were transported to Australia. Half of them were under 25 years of age. 1/5 were females. Almost all were working class, poor, generally unemployed. 1/3 were from Ireland. What were their crimes? A few were transported for rape and murder, some for arson, but most had been convicted of petty theft. Most had several previous convictions. Most of the women had been prostitutes. Each convict, on average, was convicted of 5 offences after transportation. Offences like absence without leave, insolence to masters, and drunkenness. Flogging was the standard punishment, usually 50 lashes, sometimes up to 500. One convict recalled,
"That first flogging made me ripe. I said to myself, I could take it like a bullock. I could have taken the flogger's life at the same time I felt such revenge. Flogging always gives me that feeling." In all, I had 875 lashes at my different punishments. I could stand it no longer, of course not. 7 years before my time was up, I took to the bush.
The bush that faced the escaping convict began at the coast as a coarse and tangled scrub, rising abruptly into a mountain wall which for years served as the wall of the jail. No man could find a way to cross it. They called it the Great Divide, an aged, eroded range which ran the whole length of the eastern coastland. When at last in 1813 men discovered a way over the top, they saw space, an infinity, a flat, dry, hot, never-ending plain which became flatter, drier, hotter as they went on and on to the outback, the never-never land, where rivers never ran and where rain never fell for years at a time. If convicts escape into the country, wrote a governor of the colony, they are lost, for perish they must. In the course of time, the convicts were freed. Other settlers arrived. This land became a birthplace for Australians.
Please!
Father Morrison was born in the bush and enjoys living there.
Nobody talking, please! Nobody talking! Shut up, Billy Cunningham, too! Now, we don't want any noise, please.
1, 2, 3,
You can go yahoo right through it if you like. Right, mate. Jimmy Webster from Hillston, the Black Stump. Hey!
There's an old familiar saying that's known near and far, very popular with a chap who spins a story in the bar. and it's as pure Australian as the kangaroos that jump. The fence is out near Wild Horse Tank this side of the Black Stump.
Within 100 years of the British coming to Australia, there emerged from the bush a half-legendary figure. A figure described by Australian writers of the time as the typical Australian. He is sunburnt and physically well built. He is fiercely independent. He dislikes authority and believes himself the equal of any. He has scant respect for pursuits of the mind and even less for people putting on airs. To those who accept him, he is friendly and hospitable. He cherishes his own religion, mateship, and places loyalty to his mates above everything, above female company, which is noticeably absent. His manners are rough and ready. He swears consistently, gambles heavily, and drinks deeply, on occasion. His attitude to life is stoic. He accepts hardship as a natural thing and makes dry jests about disaster.
That is really how and why the Black Stump got its name.
The Black Stump is an imaginary landmark lying somewhere out back, supposedly marking the end of the known world. The desolate, lonely space of the bush, rolling on and on like the sea, called forth a dreaming, a myth-making from the men who voyaged upon it. Incomprehensible distance could be reduced to a homely image and given tangible form in what must be the only memorial in the world to a fictitious tree stump. The Black Stump is rather like the character of the typical Australian. It stands at the borderline between reality and fantasy. Beyond the Black Stump refers to a never-never region of tall stories and larger-than-life people. To describe anything as the biggest or greatest this side of the Black Stump is to say it's the biggest or greatest in the world. Take Bonzer Jim's pub. It has the highest bar this side of the Black Stump. And for a very good reason.
Well, up she goes. Thank you. Yeah, the first. On first,
Out beyond the Black Stump, you enter a world which knows no limits to adversity or imagination. This is the area called the One Tree Plain, renowned for its excessive heat and attentive flies. But what is missing is the one tree. If you ask Barney Nash at Bonzer Jim's pub why there is no tree, he'll tell you a story about galahs, who are a type of cockatoo.
Well, of course, the trouble was with that tree, the local people, it was the only tree and a wide expanse of plain. The only place where the galahs could settle was on this one tree. Well, they tried to shoot them and they tried every darn thing that they could think of. But anyway, in came old Bill, the old bird trapper, and he used to trap these birds. And he says the only way to get rid of these bastards, he says, is to sprinkle this goo on the limbs of the tree. And they'll all stick there, see, and you get out and you grab them. But he underestimated just how many bloody galahs there was out there on that one tree plain, and only one tree. So they all settled down there, and Bill goes out with his old scattergun with his two barrels, and he has a bit of a crack at them, and he lets one go, and up the old galahs all flew, And away they go, and they took the tree with them. So if you cows are going out there tomorrow and you reckon you're going to take some pills at the one tree, I don't know, you'll have to take a tree and have to plant one. Anyway, there's nothing wrong with that, is there? Why don't you take a bloody tree out there and plant one?
Right, we go around here. I'm interested in these old antiques and all sorts of scrap metal and so forth and so on. I thought I might be able to do a deal with you, old boy. You might be able to let me out. I might buy something. What can you sell me?
The wagon.
The wagon.
Father Morrison, among other things, is a dealer in antiques and scrap metal.
Will you give me that?
Yes, you'll have it.
You'll give me that bottle?
Yes.
You're a pal, old boy. There's no doubt about you. Now, listen, the wagon now. How much do you want for that wagon?
I'll give you a present of the bloody thing, man.
You will?
Give it to you, yeah.
You're a mighty man. I'll have it restored and put in a park, and I'll put a plaque on it.
Will you?
Yeah, in honour of Jack Peacock and the family. That's right. And Mum, how old is she?
She's 6 months younger than me.
6 months younger. Well, that makes her 82 also.
Yeah.
Getting it all in there. Thanks a million, mate.
Father Morrison's quest for junk reveals the imprint of the British Empire on the Australian bush. The trail he follows is littered with the output of Britain's 19th century technology. The abandoned, rusting relics lie where they were last used, scattered through the bush like rubbish in a vast garbage dump. The products of Britain's steel mills could go anywhere and satisfy almost any need. Corrugated iron was the stuff of civilization. The British government had realized that Australia could be more than a penal colony for the convicted poor. It could offer a home from home for the British poor who were simply poor. Those whom a colonial secretary described as the redundant mass. Between 1820 and 1850, 220,000 Britons were granted assisted passages to Australia. For most of them, the alternatives were the workhouse or starvation. Australia offered hope. In 1852, a clergyman in England wrote to the Times,
"The angel of deliverance is at hand. Within a few months' voyage lies a glorious country, healthful, fertile, uninhabited, a promised land, overflowing with means of sustenance, a realized El Dorado paved with gold. Brother clergyman, hide not the marvelous, the exhilarating truth. The poor man, after a few months' labor, transformed into a prince. Cities springing up in the wilderness to the magic sound of spade and pickaxe. Gold. Pure, precious, inexhaustible gold."
Jack Parsons has been searching for gold for 50 years. He works and lives alone in the depths of the bush and sees only the mailman once every 2 weeks.
Well, we try to make a bonanza, you might say, but it hasn't come our way yet. We've done a lot of hard work, but when you're chasing gold, well, the goal's the main thing you think about. You don't think about any other worries. I think more or less it's in the blood. My father come from Victoria in the early days, and he worked in the deep lead in Victoria. It's just a really blind stab, and you're putting potholes down to find values. I've done a terrible lot of dead work here, and I might tell you the truth, I haven't much results for the fruits of my toil. But still, I'm not complaining. I intend to go on, and in the early days of Victoria, they left the boats, left all jobs to look for gold.
Come, sons of labour, toiling hard to earn a scanty livelihood, whose best of luck has been ill-starred. However you have life pursued, Fortune waits with golden charms to throw herself into your arms. The diggins ho, the diggins ha, shout for the diggins, shout hurrah, and bow, wow, wow. All the riddly, 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 bow, wow, wow.
Australia's first gold rush in the 1850s brought 500,000 people from Britain. Most of them came to Melbourne, the capital of Victoria. One of Australia's large coastal cities began its rapid growth. And on the goldfields there occurred Australia's most celebrated rebellion. The British government proclaimed that all gold in the earth of Australia belonged to Queen Victoria, to the Crown. Anyone searching for gold in the colony of Victoria must pay a licence fee of 30 shillings per month. In December 1854, at the Eureka Lead on the Ballarat goldfield, some of the diggers burnt their licences, built a stockade, and took up arms. Their principal ground for complaint was the licence hunt, a twice-weekly pursuit and maltreatment of the diggers by a notoriously irresponsible and overbearing police force. Any man found on the diggings without a licence on his person was arrested and could be heavily fined, chained to trees, or sentenced to road work with the convicts. The diggers declared they would resist as a united people any further attempts at arrest. From Melbourne, 70 miles away, detachments of the 40th Foot and the 12th Foot proceeded to Ballarat by long and rapid marches. The regiments had been sent to Australia the year before in case of trouble on the goldfields. A new flag, depicting the constellation of the Southern Cross, flew over the stockade. Beneath it, the diggers at Eureka had taken an oath to defend their rights and liberties. The diggers drew up a declaration.
Taxation without representation is tyranny. Ye are Britons. Will ye submit to oppression and injustice?
About half the diggers at Eureka were Irish. Many came from families who had resisted the English before. The 40th Foot had last seen service in Dublin. They held a long list of battle honours: Canada, Martinique, Cuba, St. Lucia, Egypt, the Peninsular Wars, Waterloo, and 3 battles in the First Afghan War. They marched to Eureka under a proclamation of martial law by the Lieutenant Governor of Victoria.
I do hereby order and authorize all officers commanding Her Majesty's forces to employ them with the utmost vigour and decision for the immediate suppression of the said rebellion and offences. God save the Queen.
Karl Marx was to describe Eureka as a revolutionary movement of the workers. The American writer Mark Twain was to see it as the finest thing in Australian history. It was the Barons and John all over again. It was Hampden and ship money. It was Concord and Lexington. But a Melbourne newspaper of the period took a less exalted view. The temper of the colonial public is not favourable to sustained political action. Eureka was a rebellion, which lasted a bare 4 days. When it began on Wednesday, the 6th of December, there were 1,000 men behind the stockade. By Saturday, the 8th, they had dwindled to a few hundred. Enthusiasm waned quickly. On the evening of Saturday, most of those who remained at the stockade simply disappeared. Saturday night was traditionally the night for a spree. Sunday was traditionally a day when nothing could happen. At 4 o'clock on the morning of Sunday, December the 3rd, 1854, the Redcoats attacked. 182 British soldiers with 94 colonial police. Within the stockade, there were about 150 men, nearly all of them asleep. The battle lasted some 10 minutes. The diggers who survived either surrendered or escaped. The troops burnt the stockade and went on a rampage, bayoneting the wounded and shooting down non-participants, male and female, hundreds of yards away. "30 diggers and 5 soldiers were killed. Eureka passed into legend as an heroic stand for independence. For the diggers, it was a miserable defeat, a fiasco. As for the gold, the promised El Dorado, one of the diggers at Eureka wrote,
"It was a nuggety El Dorado for the few, but a ruinous field of hard labour for many."
Jack Parsons has found £500 worth of gold in 50 years of mining.
No, I don't lose faith. No, it's if you're going to lose faith, and well, it's no good having it on. No. And as long as it keeps things going, well, you can't wish for more than 3 feeds a day, can you? That's all you want. In some cases, I think it's not a good thing to strike it rich. Some people, when they do strike it rich, well, the corn goes to their head. And that'd be no good, would it?
The undoubted beneficiary of the Australian gold rush was the mother country. Australian gold supplied much of the capital for Britain's industrial expansion in the mid-19th century. British capital then flowed back to Australia, building large company mines which crushed gold from the rock. The diggers worked for wages. By the end of the century, Australia had become the world's largest producer of gold. Profits were enormous. Most of them went back to Britain. In the years after the first gold rush, the parliaments of the Australian colonies passed laws permitting a man to select a small block of land. He needed no capital. He could pay off the land by annual rents, as long as he undertook improvements. He was called a free selector.
Oh, dear. Oh.
Raven Wade is a free selector. He owns 300 acres.
Hey, how you going?
Good day to you, mate. How are you?
Not so bad.
Morrison. Viv Morrison, from up the Midwest there. I believe you're Mr. Wade, isn't it, Raven?
That's right. Yeah.
Ah, it's good to meet you, mate. What do you got all these, windmills? What do you got all those for?
Oh, you know, a bit of irrigator. Silly bloody way to spend my money. I should have went away and enjoyed myself, shouldn't I?
Rather an antique method of irrigating, isn't it, around these parts?
Oh, well, it is in a way now. It is, of course.
And, you got any scrap around the place?
Yes, you can come over. Yes, right out.
You got a crook leg, have you?
Yes, I...
What happened to your leg in here?
Oh, I fell over. Hurt my hip. Oh, it's 12 days there. I was 12 days. You know, I couldn't, I couldn't do hardly anything. Just crawl about.
And how did you get help?
My brother come along. They say I hadn't been in the town for a couple of trips. I never went in, and he got a bit suspicious. He thought might be something up, so he thought he'd take a ride out. Righto. That'll be right there. I'll just pull it too. There's a couple of sheep in here.
Oh, this is your old anvil.
Yeah.
Anvil. Blacksmith's job.
Yeah.
For sure. And do you do any fencing yourself now?
Oh, I haven't done any for a good while.
Your chooks are lying in your sulky. What a terrible waste of a good sulky. Fancy that now. You don't want to part with that, do you?
No.
And the old house, you built that yourself?
Yeah.
Raven Wade's house was never quite completed. He stopped building it when his fiancée did not arrive for the wedding. That was 40 years ago. And ever since he has lived here alone. Isolation and dilapidation were the hallmarks of the free selector. 300 acres was barely enough for a living in a land where rainfall averaged less than 10 inches a year, and summer temperature hovered around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The search for water below the ground became an obsession.
I shouldn't have brought it up here. It's too dry up here. You get too many droughts. But a small farm is really no good. You want a fair bit. You'd want about 4,000 or 5,000 acres here to do much good, like on this dry country here, like to do much good, like. And you'd want to have it paid for too. You wouldn't want to be in debt. Oh no, you can make more money working. Yes, you can, and you can off these small places. You can make more money working.
Australia did not become a nation of prosperous small farmers, but for a fortunate few, the land did provide great wealth. By the 1860s, Australia was the world's largest exporter of wool. The land might be dry, but there were 3 million square miles of it. The man who became rich was the man who had the rights to enough land. In the far outback, there were vast properties, or stations as they were called. One man held a group of stations larger than the whole of Great Britain. It was imperial policy to grant the big slices of land to men with capital. The more capital a man had, the more land he would be granted. He did not have to pay for it. All he did was squat with his sheep on vacant land and pay a nominal license fee of £10 a year. As time went on, the squatter might purchase sufficient freehold to keep out small selectors. The fences of the few squatters locked up almost all the wool-producing country in Australia. Much of the land behind the fences was mortgaged to the British banks, who lent freely to the squatters. By the 1880s, 1/4 of Britain's total overseas investment was in Australia. A governor of New South Wales described the squatters as the lords of principalities. J.A. Froude, the Oxford historian, visited this wealthy squatters' station in 1885.
Sheep were browsing in hundreds, perhaps in thousands, and on a wooded ridge which was behind, I was told that there were deer. The drive was broad, level, and excellently kept. The plantation became thicker. A third gate, and we were between high-trimmed hedges of evergreen. A moment more, and we were at the door of what might have been an ancient Scotch manor house, solidly built of rough-hewn granite, the walls overrun with ivy, climbing roses, and other creepers. On the north side was a clean-mown and carefully watered lawn, with tennis ground and croquet ground, flower beds with scarlet geraniums and heliotropes. We had arrived, in fact, at an English aristocrat's country house reproduced in another hemisphere and shone upon at night by other constellations. Inside, the illusion was complete.
For the vast majority of Britons who ventured into the Australian bush, the new life meant working for wages for the squatters. The cattle drovers were the elite of the bush workers, moving herds of 1,000 and more over distances often exceeding 1,000 miles. It was nothing to spend 6 months or more on the move, 7 days a week, from daylight to dusk. Beyond towns, beyond women, beyond anyone but their own small company, the drovers depended utterly upon each other. It was amongst men like this that mateship came close to being a religion.
Cut it now.
You reckon you not get much tucking now? If I pull out a grid, you'll be getting none. How can live on wheat big stuff?
The old bloke that was there to save us his grid, we'd be getting plenty.
It's going to be hard up explaining them painful expressions that pass over our faces every time we shovel a spoonful in.
Chicken feed. good books, them you reading here?
The shanty pub was often the only building one would come across in hundreds of miles. For the drovers at the end of a trip, or for shearers who had finished several weeks' work at a wool shed, it was like an oasis in the desert.
He's thrown the railroad back and he spread them like sing up, mate.
The Hatfield boys are living, mate.
The Hatfield boys are free. We never
The man in the bush had a habit of doing his drinking in one short, glorious spree. A popular story told how a shearer finishing his contract to a squatter brought his cheque to the nearest shanty pub. The publican held it while the man drank. Until the second or third day, when the publican said the cheque had run out. Most likely the drinker had been cheated. But he was in no state to argue. He had no money and no job. That was when a shearer became a swagman. All they owned, they carried with them. A billy can for boiling water, a water bag, and on their back a bedroll containing a few clothes and a tucker bag. That bedroll had many names: a swag, a drum, a Matilda. The Australian writers who helped create the Australian legend had a habit of glorifying defeat. They turned the swagman into a hero.
Waltzing Matilda is based on factual events which occurred just before it was written here in this area. The poet Banjo Patterson came here to this billabong at Combo, and he was told the story.
Richard McGoffin is an amateur historian who lives in the bush and believes in the Australian legend.
And I think he got a lot of inspiration when he came here, seeing this beautiful waterhole and the cooliebar trees, which are some of the best in Australia.
The events which Banjo Patterson was told of relate to the last battle in the Australian bush between the haves and the have-nots, the shearers' strike. In December 1894, in the Winton district of central Queensland, 16 armed shearers assembled secretly, planning to attack a squatter's station and burn his wool shed. Their flag was the Southern Cross of Eureka, and they probably looked and behaved very much like the bushmen of today who live around Winton and who reenact the event on its 75th anniversary.
Righto, mate.
Richard McGoffin takes the part of Neil Hylan, the shearers' leader.
Errol Flynn, Clark Gable.
No. About them. Tell you what, Ned Kelly.
Father Morrison, a long way from his parish, plays a man who came from Brisbane called Frenchy Hoffmeister. It was his job actually to set the wool shed alight.
Ah, very good. Now, I want a good camouflage because we're going to take these bastards tonight.
At its peak, the shearers' strike involved 26,000 men. There were many other bands of shearers like this who burnt down fences and wool sheds. Now it was the turn of Dagworth Station because the squatter was employing non-union labour, blacklegs, or scabs as the Australians called them.
Okay, there they are. Down there past those green trees, we'll tie the horses up there, then down the gully into them, eh?
Okay, Joey.
This attack on Dagworth was the shearers' last offensive. Already most of the shearers had surrendered in the face of overwhelming force. Government had taken seriously the shearers' talk of setting up a communist republic in Western Queensland.
Righto, on. Out the bastards. Come on.
Let's get them. Let out.
shed, one man was on guard, a police constable. Leading the defenders was the squatter himself, Robert Macpherson. There were also 3 policemen and a number of station hands. Volleys of shots were exchanged for some 20 minutes. There were no casualties. Under cover of the gunfire, Frenchy Hofmeister crept up and set fire to the shed. During the fire, the shearers made their getaway. There were 200 sheep in the wool shed. They were roasted. The next day, the squatter and the policeman went in search of the shearers. They returned with the body of Frenchy Hofmeister. The coroner's verdict was suicide. These events, according to Richard McGoffin, inspired the poet Banjo Patterson to write Waltzing Matilda. In his song, the shearer who burnt the shed becomes a swagman, hunted to death by squatter and policeman.
Oh, there once was a swagman camped in a billabong, under the shade of a curly-bar tree. And he sang as he looked at his old billy boiling, "Who'll come a waltzing Matilda with me?" Down came a jumbuck to drink at the waterhole. Up jumped the swagman and grabbed him with glee. And he sang, as he stowed him away in his tucker bag, "You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me." Down came the squatter, a-riding his thoroughbred. Down came the policeman, 1, 2, 3. "Whose is the jumbuck you've got in your tucker bag? You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me." But the swagman, he up and he jumped in the waterhole, drowning himself by the curly-bar tree. And his ghost may be heard as it sings in the billabong, "You'll come a waltzing Matilda with me."
About the time of the legendary death of the swagman, there also perished the naive dreams of Australian protest. Talk of a republic, of cutting ties with Britain, withered away. In the last decade of the 19th century, the shearers were totally defeated. The economy collapsed in a severe depression, and Australia experienced her worst drought. The poets, like Banjo Patterson, gave all this a romantic gloss. They were godfather to a legend about the Australian which saw him laughing at adversity and accepting tragedy with stoic resignation. When the 6 colonies entered the 20th century as a federation, they brought together for the new Australian flag the emblems of rebellion and imperialism. The diggers now marched with the redcoats. At the very moment she became a united country, Australia had 16,000 men, all volunteers, fighting in the Boer War. During the Great War, Australia raised a volunteer army of 330,000 who fought in the Middle East and Europe. The Australian character, with its tradition of fighting authority and of asserting independence, found a climax to its legend in the service of king and empire. On the 25th of April 1915, the Australians landed at Gallipoli. They were part of the Australia-New Zealand Army Corps, known from the initials as Anzacs. Gallipoli was a defeat. But the anniversary of the landing became Australia's closest approach to a national day, Anzac Day. A day when Australian veterans of both world wars marched through the streets of Sydney as they marched through all the cities and towns of Australia.
It is so typically, ruggedly Australian. For in a land that is 200 years young and perhaps 2,000 million years ancient, we must say that we are proud of our Anzac tradition in this Captain Cook's discovered country.